What a pleasure it is to have the opportunity to talk with you today. So today, for those of you listening out there, I'm talking with JOANNE Ramos, who is the author of The Farm. I tell you, this is quite a book. It is quite a story. And before I spill any of the beans, let's find out what made you write this book.
Well, it's funny because the book has been called a dystopian novel by a lot of the reviewers and a number of the readers. And that was never the frame through which I ever thought of it in the 5 years that I was writing it. It really started much more as an exploration of how we see or don't see other people, and especially all these questions I've had for a long time about this idea of the American dream.
Right.
And a lot of that was rooted in the fact that as an immigrant to this country, my parents and especially my dad really believed in the American dream and really taught us, you guys, if you work hard and you guys are smart, you're going to make it, because this country you can, and there's truth to that. I feel that that's the whole reason they came to the States. But of course there's a lot of untruth to that too, and I think maybe I was a very naive 18-year-old, but it really wasn't until I got to college out east at Princeton that I started to question it, not because I didn't meet so many bright people who worked very hard to get there, but because I did meet some people who got there for other reasons, right? Like their legacies, third, fourth generation or whatever. And then as I sort of crossed that economic divide by working in finance for a while and private equity and then and on, rather than make me believe in the American dream more, it made me believe in it less, because, you just start realizing as an adult how much of any kind of success is also due to things out of your control. Yeah. And my parents cared about my education, that that I got into Princeton, that the banks recruited at Princeton, so many things. Yeah. And it really, really, really came to a head when I started raising my kids in Manhattan in my 30s. And at that point, I'd worked in finance. I was raising them with a lot more, economically at least, and a lot more privilege than I had growing up. And one, I didn't realize how much you could give your kids and how much wealthy kids got until I became wealthier. Right. And I never knew any of this stuff when I was 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 in Wisconsin. And the other thing was that because I was still working at The Economist, I had nannies who would help me raise my kids. And the women I befriended were all mothers themselves. In fact, all single mothers for whatever reason. Of the 6 or 8 women I consider close friends who are divorced, they're all single moms. Some of them have left their kids back home, whether in the Caribbean or in the Philippines, to raise other people's kids in America. And so that was like ground zero for my questions of what meritocracy means and what the level playing field means and what all of that stuff means, especially because at that time, those Filipinas I became friends with who were domestic workers were the only Filipinas I knew in Manhattan. For, I guess because of the world I was now moving in, there wasn't a lot of diversity, quite honestly, and not any other Filipinos at the time. So it was out of this sort of but this kind of stew of questions that I started to write the book. And it started out as a not very different book, but a much more intimate book about a young Filipina woman who decides to leave her newborn baby at home to become a baby nurse to a wealthier family. And then it sort of morphed into The Farm about a surrogacy facility, which makes it much more dystopian, I guess, to many people. But again, that wasn't the driver. It wasn't what I meant to do.
Well, that makes sense then. When you've met people and as you moved up financially, then you had the opportunity to have in your own sphere people who were nannies. And it's interesting that you use that as kind of the starting point, because in my travels around the world, I've met many women who have left home in order to either take care of their individual children or support the entire family by being domestic help out. Sometimes they've gone into situations where they thought they could just have a set amount of time, a year or 2 years, that they could do something, but then find that they really could not escape that particular place. I won't name the countries I've been in where that happened, but so the interesting thing is that here are these women who are, as you were saying, the one is a baby nurse. In the story, she became a baby nurse, but she had never been a baby nurse. So she's kind of showed up and decided to do it. But then she was exceptional at it. She learned how to put babies to sleep. My background is nursing, and I've worked in neonatal and with well babies. And so I know nothing is more distressing to new mothers and new fathers than the fact that their babies won't sleep, because, of course, that means they don't sleep either. And so I thought that was really, really cool. And then to see them work, but never really get ahead. And if anything happened, like the one who passed out, and now she's got someone else has to do her work. And so I loved it. I loved where you started and the reality that so many single parent females are faced with, where if they don't have skills, if they don't have education, they go to that maternal side, and then they can't take care of their own kids for taking care of someone else's.
Exactly. And what's interesting to me is I've had a few people say to me about the farm. Now that's Golden Oaks, this luxury surrogacy facility where many of these women of color and other women are carrying the babies of the ultra rich. I've had people say to me, wow, what a crazy place, what a crazy world your world is, where these mothers are sacrificing time with their own babies to take care of richer people's fetuses. Isn't that weird? I'm like, well, but it's kind of what's happening now, right? I just moved it down the early gestational stage, right? But the idea that many women and men, but I was focusing on many women sacrifice time with their families and the childhood of their children for their children, to support their children, happens every day. Well, I just made it a more like a sexier, different sort of story. Yeah. But it's just an extension of where we are. It's not radically different.
It's not radically different. I mean, when you go to the part where they can't leave, where they really given their whole body and soul in order to have this life transforming amount of money come in to help them. I understand that. I've worked in different situations where what seems like regular money to us is life-changing to someone else. And there are things that I've done. I mean, I went to work overseas and left my son with my sister in order to get away from the burden of student loans and those kind of things. And our life has been different as a result of it. But there are many people who condemned me for leaving. How could you leave your son? Well, I wasn't seeing him. I was working 2.5 jobs, as your folks were doing in here. They're working. They wouldn't see their children anyway.
Right. None of my friends, I'm thinking of one particular friend who works 2 jobs, 7 days a week, several children. She doesn't see them. They're in Queens. She doesn't see them. And I don't know that that's any less tragic than her leaving them in the Philippines, which seems to capture people's minds a little more, right? Oh my gosh, you had to leave them, or judge her, or she has to leave them. It's but it's many working class families have to do that all the time, and that was what I was hoping. I think some of the power of fiction is that you can make a propulsive story that feels really different, but in fact isn't.
It is.
And then when people read it, because it's propulsive and feels different, they get swept away in it without any prejudgments.
Right.
Pop out the other end, they're like, wait, but it is similar. And what do I feel about our current? That was my hope.
That was your goal.
Not everyone's going to feel that way, but some readers might come out the other end and be like, that is messed up. The farm. Hold on, wait, it's not right.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I have a nanny and she has a child. Right. Or, that's right.
I've had women. I can't even tell you how many women at different readings and things come up to me, and I really say this without judgment, and say to me, oh my gosh, I found your book cringy, which is a funny kind of made up but kind of great word, cringy, especially the chapter with advice from the older baby. I found it cringy because I had a fill in the blank Filipina baby nurse who helped me with my twins, or a Mexican housekeeper. Right. I don't think I ever really saw her. I have had, I'm not kidding, dozens of women, I don't know, come up and say that to me. And does that mean the book has done anything to really change anything? No, but I hope that's a power of fiction that you might be able to see your current state a little differently, right? You get the distance somehow. I don't know.
Well, I think even as an African-American woman growing up in the South, of the generation where I grew up in segregation, and my mother and her mother could go into people's homes, but they couldn't go in the front door. I mean, they could do things. And there are people who they can't believe when I tell that story that I'm not 95 years old, because they think we're so far removed from anything that's unpleasant. And this is really good, because the average household these days is run by a single female. And in the African American community, it's up to 80% single parent female households, and probably something like 50% now in the USA. So I think that this is great. But let's go on to the other side. So we talked about the beginnings, where you're really showing the personality, the heart, what's going on with these two women, Jane and is it Ate?
It's Ate.
Ate.
Which means big sister in Tagalog.
Okay. Yeah. So those two have such an amazing relationship, and then of course it builds on with other women. But how does Jane decide that she has to go to the farm? I mean, I know because I read it, but to help our folks though.
Well, so Jane has a newborn baby daughter at home. Her husband just took off and left her with a kid. She's not educated. She didn't finish high school. And she just got fired from her one chance at a baby nurse job. So it's not like, and with baby nurse jobs, you get them through word of mouth. You get them because your employer loved you, and that's why another mom's going to trust you with their newborn, right? So that's kind of, that door has closed for her. And she could go back to sort of cleaning the floors at a nursing home, or she could take this, what seems like a golden ticket, to spend 10 months at a luxury spa and just carry someone else's baby. And because she's already carried a baby before, it's not like it's radically new to her. True. And she thinks, okay, this could actually change my life, and I'm going to give it a shot. And so that is was her thinking behind it. It's funny, we meaning Random House in the U.S. and my UK publishers is Bloomsbury Publishing. They did separate surveys of younger women to see if they would take a job at a place like Golden Oaks. And again, I don't know what the pool of people, I think it's self-selected because it's women who are going to take that survey, but 60% or something of women said they would do it for a few $100,000. Yes,
money.
Life-changing money. Pay off student loans, or if they're artists so they could write, or whatever it is. And Jane comes from even less, a world of fewer options probably than the women answering the survey on Instagram. And so to her, it's just one more thing she would do for a child, but at least one thing that could lead to a change in her life versus the slow kind of grind of trying to make it work day in and day out. And, I've definitely spoken with readers who think Golden Oaks is the worst place in the world because it does commodify women. I've spoken to other people who think, and yet it does allow women to change their lives. That was really, the whole idea of that was very much rooted, or at least stirred up a lot of conversations I had with my late father when I was growing up. He is a real believer in America and the American dream, and he had studied economics, and he would always talk to me about free trade and free transactions, and I took some econ classes at Princeton, and the basic premise of free trade is that because it's a voluntary transaction, every transaction is voluntary in the markets, therefore, because no one has a gun to their head to make, it's free will, and so it's mutually beneficial. And so the economic term is it's mutually beneficial. Every free trade is mutually beneficial. And my dad and I would argue about this all the time when I was growing up. But what if one side of that party has so much less power than the other? How is that?
Is it really free?
Is it really free, and is it really good? And my dad would do the thing where he'd be like, well, Joanne, it's easy for you to say now growing up here in this country, but anybody here is better off than the people I know in the Philippines. And so it became this moral relative thing. And I still don't, I just think it's so complicated, these questions, and that was what I was hoping to stir up to. Yeah. And maybe two truths can be true. Maybe it can help women change their lives, and yet it still is manipulative and abusive. It could be that both truths hold, right? Exactly. That you don't have to pick one or the other. But I'm very interested in that conversation because I feel like it's a conversation we have all the time in our era of hyper-capitalism, where I grew up religious and believing in God, and I'm a little lapsed now, but I still feel like my moral framework is very much influenced by how I was raised. Right. And I feel not raising my kids with religion, sorry mom, as much as I should or want to. What is the moral framework I'm giving them? And what is the moral framework of capitalism? The moral framework of capitalism, if you can call it a moral framework, is if the market will bear it, it's okay. Yeah. But are we really okay with that? Maybe we are, but I at least want people to question, are we really okay with that? That if we're willing to pay for it and someone is desperate enough to take that offer, that's morally okay. Not economically efficient, morally okay, and the kind of society we want.
It's really hard to see. Yeah. Right? As a nurse, I'm there when people need transplants. And the question is, if I am a good person who's put on my driver's license that if I die and my organs are good, please give them to the next person on the list. Well, that seems to be perfectly fine in American society. Not every society that you would give part of your dead body to somebody else. But here, we also know that there's another black market where there are people who sell their organs on purpose, or people who corrupt the list and get higher up so that they can get organs before they're supposed to on the list.